The plea in the dust, the sun was hot above the small alien village. The air was dry, and the ground cracked like broken glass. No one spoke. Everyone was too afraid. The soldiers had arrived. They wore black armor and carried long weapons. Their faces were cold, without feeling. They moved like machines, not like people. And behind them, tied with rope, walked a woman and her young son. The woman had silver eyes and dark, tangled hair. Her clothes were torn, and her hands were shaking. The boy was small, maybe 5 years old. He looked tired and scared, his legs weak from walking. His name was Eric, but the soldiers didn't care about names. They had one goal: punishment. The boy had stolen a piece of fruit. Just one. But in this part of the galaxy, stealing even to survive was a crime. And the punishment was cruel. The mother knew what was coming. She dropped to her knees in front of the guards. "Please," she said, her voice shaking, "punish me, not my son." No one answered her. One soldier grabbed her arm. Another raised a whip. The boy began to cry, confused and afraid. And then everything changed. A shadow appeared from the edge of the village. It was a man, tall, human. His clothes were dusty from travel, and his eyes were hard like stone. No one knew his name. He didn't belong here. But he walked straight into the middle of the camp without fear. The soldiers paused. The crowd turned to watch. The man didn't speak. He just stood there, looking at the boy, then the mother, then the whip. Silence filled the air. Heavy, thick silence. The soldier holding the whip laughed. "This is none of your business, human," he said. "Go away." But the human didn't move. The woman looked up confused. Who was this man? Why was he here? She had never seen a human before, only heard stories, some good, most bad. She didn't expect kindness. She didn't expect anything. Then the human stepped forward and removed his jacket. Slowly, he placed it around the boy's shoulders. The child stopped crying, surprised. The jacket was warm and smelled like the wind. "Where I come from," the man finally said, "we don't hurt children." His voice was calm, strong. It didn't need to be loud to be powerful. The soldier raised the whip again. "You want to protect him? Then take the punishment yourself." The human looked at the whip and stepped forward again. The whip came down fast. But the human caught it. Just one hand. No anger, no fear. Just calm strength. The crowd gasped. The soldier tried to pull the whip free, but he couldn't. The human's grip was too strong. The leader of the guard stepped in. "Who are you to interfere?" The human looked at him and said nothing. The silence returned. But this time it felt different. It wasn't fear. It was warning. The woman didn't understand why this man was helping her. She had nothing to give. No money, no power. Only her child. She whispered, Why are you doing this?" The human didn't answer. He just turned to the guards and said, "If your law says this child must suffer, then your law is broken." Crowd stood still. No one moved. Even the soldiers hesitated. And in that moment, everything began to change. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. Asterisk. The heart that didn't break. The guards didn't know what to do. No one had ever stood in their way before. When they gave orders, people obeyed. When they raised a whip, no one dared to stop them. But this time, a human had stopped them with only one hand and a calm voice. The soldier holding the whip pulled hard, but the human didn't let go. He didn't flinch. He didn't shout. He just stood there like a mountain that refused to move. The whip hung between them like a question no one could answer. The captain of the guards, a tall alien with a scar across his neck, stepped forward. His armor was gold-trimmed, showing his rank. He looked at the human with cold eyes. "You have no power here," the captain said. "This is our law. This is our land." The human met his stare. "Then your law is cruel," he replied. "And your land is ruled by fear." Whispers rose from the villagers. They had never seen anyone talk back to the captain. The mother still knelt in the dirt, holding her son close. She didn't understand what gave this man such courage, or what made his heart so steady in the face of danger. "You will be punished next," the captain warned. "Is that what you want?" The human looked down at the child. The boy stared back with wide eyes, still wearing the man's coat. His small hands gripped the edges tightly, like it was the only safe thing in the world. Then the human said something no one expected. "If taking his pain makes you feel powerful," he said, "then hurt me. But understand this, I won't break. And if you try to hurt him again, you'll regret it." The captain laughed. It was sharp and mocking. He ordered 2 guards to seize the human. They moved fast, but the human was faster. In one smooth motion, he twisted the whip from the soldier's hand and stepped aside. One guard fell forward. The other stopped, unsure. The human didn't strike. He didn't run. He only raised the whip and dropped it on the ground. "I didn't come to fight," he said, "but I won't let you harm the innocent." The mother stood slowly. She still held her son's hand. Her legs were shaking, but her eyes were wide with wonder. The captain stared at the human for a long moment. Then he gave a cruel smile. "Fine, you want her pain? Take it. She's yours now, but you'll find she comes with chains." Then he turned to walk away, signaling his guards to follow. The soldiers didn't look back, but the captain gave one final warning. "You saved her today. Let's see if you can protect her tomorrow." When they were gone, the village was silent again. The human turned to the mother. She looked tired, broken, unsure. She wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. He didn't ask her name. He didn't offer his. He simply said, "Let's go." "It's not safe here anymore." She followed, still holding her son. And for the first time in days, her steps felt lighter. Not because her pain was gone, but because someone else was willing to carry a piece of it. That day, a cruel punishment had been stopped, but mercy had made enemies, and the road ahead would not be easy. Asterisk chains and choices, they left the village in silence. The human walked ahead, steady and quiet. The alien woman followed, her child in her arms. Behind them, the sky was dark. Smoke still rose from the village where fear had ruled for years. But now, something new had started. Something strange. Something dangerous. Her name was Alari. She had once been proud. She had once believed in justice. But after the war, after the camps, after the hunger, she believed in only one thing: survival. The human didn't ask for thanks. He didn't speak much at all. He simply led them toward the hills, where no patrols dared to go. She didn't understand why he helped her. What did he want? What did he gain? As night came, they found shelter in an old broken transport shell, half buried in the dust. Alari laid her son down, brushing the dirt from his face. The child slept, too tired to be afraid. She turned to the human. "Why did you protect us?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at the stars above, as if searching for something. Then he said, "Because I know what it's like to watch someone you love suffer and not be able to stop it." Alari was quiet. She didn't ask more. But the peace didn't last long. By morning, a hovercraft flew low over the hills. It was fast, military grade, and headed straight for them. The human didn't panic. He waited, watching its path. He knew what it meant. They'd been tracked. The slavers weren't finished. Ilari's breath caught. She grabbed her child. "They found us." The human stood tall. "No, they found me." He turned and walked toward the approaching vehicle. Alari watched in disbelief. Inside the hovercraft was a slaver officer, well-fed, with metal rings on his arms and a cruel smile on his face. He stepped down, flanked by 2 guards. "We didn't come for blood," the officer said. "We came to make a deal." The human raised an eyebrow. "I don't make deals with slavers." But the officer ignored the warning. "She's marked. She was sold to us long ago. Her life has value. And you look like someone who can pay." The human said nothing, so the officer continued, "You can buy her freedom. Pay the price and we walk away. Or we take her back, and the child too. It's simple." Elari couldn't believe what she was hearing. She was standing just a few feet away, and they talked about her like she was an object, a thing. The human finally spoke. "What's the price?" The officer smiled. 10 million credits, Elari gasped. That was more money than anyone carried. It was an impossible number, a joke. But the human didn't laugh. He looked at the officer and said, "I'll pay." Even the guards blinked in confusion. "You have that kind of money?" The officer asked. "No," the human replied. "But I have something more dangerous." He took 1 step closer and added, "I have time, I have skills, and I have nothing to lose." The slavers didn't understand what he meant. But they would, because this wasn't about a trade anymore. It was about a promise. He would not let her be chained again. And he would tear down the walls of anyone who tried. The night of fire, the slavers' camp stood far beyond the mountains hidden deep in the rocks, protected by drones, guards, and steel gates. It was known by many names: the pit, the market of chains. But most simply called it what it was: a prison for the helpless. No one escaped it. No one challenged it. Until now, 3 days had passed since the human made the promise. 3 days of silence. Then, without warning, the sky exploded. It began with the light's sharp beams cutting through the darkness. Guards ran. Alarms screamed. Drones dropped from the sky, one by one, short-circuited in mid-air. Something had breached the outer wall. But no army had come, no fleet, just one human. No one saw him enter. But inside the base, explosions began to bloom like fireflowers in the dark. Storage rooms burst. Weapon lockers ignited. Power lines snapped like whips. Panic spread fast. Guards shouted. Slaves huddled in corners, afraid but watching. In the shadows he moved quickly, fast, quiet, focused. The human knew the design of the camp. He had studied it during the quiet hours while Elari and her child slept. He had memorized the guards' movements. He had waited for this moment. And now, nothing would stop him. He didn't fight for gold. He didn't fight for glory. He fought for a promise. Elari lay in a locked cell near the back of the compound. Her arms were bound. Her head ached. She'd been beaten when she tried to protect another prisoner. Her eyes were swollen, but her spirit was still alive. Suddenly, the ground shook. The power went out. Doors began to unlock. Screams echoed across the base, but these were not screams of pain. They were screams of fear. The slavers were running. Her cell door opened. Smoke rolled in. And then he was there. The human stood in the doorway, his face half covered by a torn cloth. He looked like a ghost from a war story, covered in dust and firelight. But his eyes were calm. "Elari," he said. She couldn't believe it. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She only nodded, tears slipping down her cheek. He stepped in, lifted her in his arms, and carried her out without a word. Behind them, the walls of the slaver base began to fall, not just from fire, but from something deeper: fear. The guards no longer knew who was in control. Their weapons meant nothing in the dark. Their pride had turned to panic. As The human passed through the halls. He opened every locked cell. He gave no speech. He shouted no orders. But the message was clear. Run. Be free. Now, by dawn, the base was gone. Not captured. Not rebuilt. Gone. Alari sat beside a small fire in the wild hills, wrapped in a blanket. Her son slept in her arms. She stared into the flames, her heart full of questions. The human sat nearby, fixing a small transmitter from scrap metal, quiet as always. Finally, she asked, "Why did you come for me?" He didn't look up. He just said, "Because someone once left my mother behind. I won't make the same mistake." She said nothing more. But in her heart, something heavy began to melt. For the first time in her life, she believed in a future that didn't hurt. A future where kindness could burn hotter than any fire. The road of dust and blood, the fire was behind them now. The slaver base was nothing but ash. But peace did not follow. The road ahead was long, dangerous, and it was soaked in dust. And the promise of blood. The human walked in front, scanning the horizon with sharp, quiet eyes. Alari followed behind, her son held tightly in her arms. She had no strength left, but she didn't stop. Not when the sun burned her skin. Not when the wind carried the scent of danger. She kept moving because he was moving. Every step he took felt like protection, but he didn't talk much. Sometimes he looked at the boy and gave a small nod or smile, but mostly he stayed silent, focused, watching for threats. They crossed canyons, walked through abandoned roads, passed through alien ruins no one dared to enter. Alari noticed how he never slept more than a few minutes. He always made sure they ate first. And when her son had fever one night, the human walked miles alone just to find medicine from a wrecked transport ship. She didn't understand him. He was rough, quiet, and yet kind in the ways that mattered most. One night as they rested under a rock shelter, she asked softly, "Why do you care?" The human didn't answer right away. He rubbed dust from his jacket, then replied, "Because caring is the only thing they can't control." Alari didn't know what to say. She watched him for a long moment. There was pain in his eyes, but not weakness. He had been hurt before, but it had not made him cruel. It had made him unbreakable. The next morning, the sky changed. Dark clouds moved fast. It wasn't weather. It was ships. Scout drones buzzed overhead. Lights scanned the ground. Voices crackled from hidden speakers. The slavers had placed a bounty, a large one. Not just for Alari, but for the human too. Someone wanted him gone. Badly. He stopped walking. His eyes followed the drones above. There. Close, he muttered. Too close. Ilari's heart raced. What do we do? The human turned to her. We don't stop. That's what we do. And they didn't. Even when mercenaries on hoverbikes came from the east. Even when snipers appeared on the ridge. Even when the boy cried and begged for rest. The human kept moving, pulling them along, shielding them with his body, always placing himself between them and danger. He never cursed. He never panicked. He simply fought when he had to and walked when he could. But each fight left a scar. By the end of the 5th day, his side was cut, his leg bruised, and his left hand burned from catching a stun blast. Still, he didn't slow down. El Ari finally said, "You're going to die if you keep doing this." He stopped and looked at her, just for a second. "If I die," he said, "it will be on my feet, not watching a child get dragged away. Not while I'm still breathing." She didn't argue, because in that moment, she understood. He wasn't just helping them. He was fighting for something that had been taken from him long ago. Maybe a family, maybe a home, maybe even a child of his own. He wasn't walking through dust and blood just for her. He was walking through it to make sure someone else never had to. And somewhere deep in her heart, Ilari made a silent promise. If he fell, she would rise for him, for her son Dot, and for the human heart that never gave up. Asterisk. The trial of mercy, the chase ended at the edge of the Capitol. Towering walls stood before them, smooth, silver, and guarded by elite soldiers from 10 different species. This was the seat of power, a place where justice was written but rarely followed, a place where the poor disappeared and the rich rewrote truth. The human didn't come here by accident. He came by choice. Ilari begged him to stay hidden. "They'll kill you," she whispered. "They don't listen. They don't care." But he looked past the walls. "And let the world hear what they pretend not to care about." He walked toward the gates with Ilari and her son behind him. They were stopped instantly, weapons raised. Commands shouted Dot, but the human didn't resist. He raised his hands and said, "I've come to speak truth. If that's a crime, then judge me now." They were arrested, dragged before the high tribunal, a room of cold metal and colder hearts. The judges sat above, dressed in bright robes, pretending to represent law. Their eyes were sharp, their voices slow. They looked down at the human as if he were a wild animal. One judge asked, "You interfered with lawful punishment. You attacked a security base. You freed a marked slave. Do you deny this?" The human stood straight. "No, I did all of it." The room fell quiet. Another judge leaned forward. "And why?" The human's voice didn't shake. "Because no child should suffer for being hungry. Because no woman should be sold for trying to protect her son. Because silence is not peace, it's fear." The judges whispered among themselves. Ilari held her son tightly, afraid of what would come next. Then the sentence came. The human was to be exiled. No planet would take him. No ship could carry him legally. He would become a ghost in the galaxy hunted. Nameless, forgotten. And yet, he smiled. It was not a smile of joy. It was a smile of defiance. "I don't need a planet," he said quietly. "I carry my law with me." Before the guards could pull him away, a voice spoke. Soft, from the back. "I will speak." Heads turned. It was Ilari. She stepped forward, shaking, but her voice was strong. "You sit up there and talk about law, but you never came to our villages. You never saw what we lived through. That man saved us. He gave us hope when your laws gave us chains. If that's justice, then I don't want it." The guards moved to silence her, but the crowd watching didn't stay silent. One by one, voices rose. People who had suffered. People who had lost. People who remembered a time when humans were called monsters, yet saw one act like a savior. A merchant spoke. Then a former slave. Then a guard. Then a child. The chamber filled with stories. And for the first time, the judges were not in control. The head judge banged the gavel. "This court is not a place for speeches." He shouted. The human looked him in the eye. "Then it's not a place for justice either." The hearing ended in chaos. The sentence still stood, but so did something else. A movement. It started with one voice, then 2, then 100. The human was let out in chains, but he didn't look defeated. He had brought the truth into there. Hall. And sometimes that's more dangerous than any weapon, because once a heart is touched by mercy, it never forget. The heart that changed a world. The chains were heavy, but his steps were not. The human walked through the crowd with bruises on his arms and blood on his lip. The guards pushed him forward, hoping to shame him, but they didn't understand. A man like him could not be shamed for doing what was right. Ilari stood at the edge of the plaza, her son beside her, watching with wide, trembling eyes. She wanted to run to him, but she knew she couldn't stop what was coming. He had saved her. He had saved them both. Now, he was being sent into exile, alone, forgotten, or so they thought. What the judges didn't see, what the guards didn't hear was The change that had already started. In the villages beyond the walls, people whispered his name. In hidden cities, they replayed his trial. Not because he was strong, but because he was kind. Because when others turned away, he stepped forward. The boy, Eric, clutched his mother's hand and looked up. "Why are they taking him?" Ilari knelt beside him. Her voice was soft, because he did what they were too afraid to do. At the spaceport, the guards loaded the human into a transport meant for exile. But the pilot refused to start the ship. "I won't fly this," he said. "Not today." The guards shouted, but another voice joined him. Then another. Mechanics, crew, passers-by. No ship. No exile. And then something happened that no one expected. The crowd blocked the gate. They didn't yell. They didn't throw rocks. They just stood there silent, still, unafraid. People of all species, rich and poor, elders and youth. They had one message, spoken without words. This man is not a criminal. He is a symbol. Inside the ship, the human watched through the window. For once, he looked surprised. Ilari moved through the crowd. She stood before the ship and raised her voice. "You say he's an exile. I say he's a protector." The guards drew weapons, but no one moved. 1,000 stood against them, calm as the earth. The judges had no choice. They ordered the transport to stand down. The human was unchained, but he didn't. "Cheer." He walked out slowly and looked around at the faces staring back at him. He said nothing, because he knew the truth. This wasn't his victory. It was theirs. The change had started not with a sword or a speech, but with one quiet act of mercy. One refusal to let a child suffer. One decision to protect a stranger. That's what lit the fire. And now, that fire could not be put out. Later, Ilari asked him, "What will you do now?" He didn't have a plan. He never had. But he looked at her, then at her son, and said, "Keep walking. Keep helping. Wherever I'm needed." She nodded slowly. "You changed everything," she said. He gave her a small smile. "No, you did. You spoke. They listened." She looked down at her son, who was now free, safe, and smiling for the first time in a long while. And deep in her heart, she knew. He wasn't just a man. He was a reminder that even in a cruel world, one human heart, steady, kind, and unbreakable, could change everything.